I'm Anahit. I'm from New York. I'm a sculptor who is part of this really sweet collective called the Armenian Creatives in New York. And through that collective, I was introduced to Kamee and Emily's work. And they invited me to be here today because I have this project called Armenian Joy where I'm archiving family photographs to unite the diaspora. And so with that work that they were inspired by, have asked me to come and join them today. So thank you.
I'm Emily Mkrtichian. I'm the director of There Was, There Was Not. And also just really, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay, great. A little more, I'm here, I'm seeing this. Okay, I'm gonna try to project, yeah? Okay, it's not my normal voice. Yeah, I'm a filmmaker and multimedia artist. This is my first, oh, thank you. This is my first feature film. Oh, you have your own microphone. I do. Okay. And this is Kamee.
Hi, I'm Kamee Abrahamian. I directed SYMPTOM, the short film that opened Emily's beautiful film. I am an artist and a filmmaker, a storyteller, so many things. A mother, a producer, a writer, and I'm really happy to be here today with everybody. And it's an honor to share this space and to for SYMPTOM to open for Emily's film has been really special, and it's really special to have Anahit here as well. Thank you.
So to begin, do you guys want to talk about what inspired you to tell these stories?
Okay, I'll started. Yes. So actually, I spend every summer in Armenia since the early 2000s, and I happened to see SYMPTOM, one of SYMPTOM's concerts, where I heard their music through a filmmaker friend of mine who was actually documenting their lives for many years, and I instantly fell in love with their music. I connected with it in a really profound way. As a queer and feminist storyteller, it's not often, sometimes you find like other Armenian artists and you're like, oh my goodness, we are the same, and it's so great to find your people. And so I became really connected to their story, and we became friends. And so the filmmaker friend of mine had a lot of footage that he had been collecting for years and used in his feature film, Five Dreamers and a Horse. His name is Vahagan Khachaturian. And there was a lot of footage that hadn't been used and a lot of their story that hadn't been told. So I reached out to Sona and Amasya, and I was like, let's keep telling the story. Let's bring you to Canada to perform. And that's kind of where, that film started and ended.
I mean, as you can tell from the film, it started out as one thing and turned into a totally different thing. So my original inspiration for the film, I had made a short film in Artsakh before that was just about the first group of women who went out to work as deminers, like taking out the landmines. And so I was spending a lot of time in Artsakh, and I noticed that the women there had this particular like strength and humor and like determination about them that I found very interesting and unique. But in Artsakh, because of the legacy of the war, they also didn't have the same rights as many other folks, even like in neighboring countries. So I was really interested in the kind of the role of women after conflict, which we see in lots of countries, that they tend to be the glue that holds a community together and doing a lot of the work, but not recognized in the same way. So I started working with these 4 women, and of course the film again turned into something very different, but originally I was ironically interested in the role of women after conflict and how inspiring those original women that I found could be.
Thanks. Thank you. And how did you go about casting and like finding this talent that you really wanted to tell their stories?
It was a really organic process. I just was spending a lot of time in Artsakh, and the women, two of the women were like friends of friends. Like a friend suggested their friend who they thought was interesting and had a interesting story and kind of fit into the thing that I was interested in. It was important to me that it was different, like women doing very different kinds of work, to kind of showcase these different ways that women tend to rebuild societies after conflict. And Sose, though Sose was a little different. Sose, I was teaching a film workshop in Artsakh, and the students in my workshop were like, "Oh, we really want to make a film about Sose." And I was like, "Who's Sose?" And like, obviously the rest is history. But yeah, so different ways.
Yeah, I feel like I touched on it a little bit, for sure. Yeah, I don't know.
And excuse me. And as mothers, you know, I know it's challenging with doing creative work and parenting. So whenever you're choosing what projects to do next, like, and the sacrifices that you have to make between that, can you just share a little bit about that?
Emily's looking at me because I have a 7-year-old, and the reason, actually, Emily and I are collaborators. We've worked on other films together, and Anahit, you have an 8-year-old, so
Yeah.
this is a thing we connect about all the time. But yeah, the film that Emily and I worked on together years ago is called Transmission. It is the first Armenian science fiction film known to date. Ready to be fought on this, but I don't. But that film was, it was an interesting experience, and I only bring it up because you gave me that look. I was like, my kiddo was like a year, I think, took their first steps during pre-production, and then like I was like nursing between takes because I was in the film, so it was just like running off set to nurse, and then like coming back to do more takes, and it was a wild time. And now that Emily is in the infant phase, she's always like, "How did you do this? Like, how did you?" And I'm like, "I don't know. It was all a dream. It was all a blur."
What Kamee doesn't mention is that we shot the film in her house when her kid was 1 year old. Yeah. And I just had a kid who was, I got pregnant during the editing process of this film. The edit of this film was a really challenging process because, in a larger sense, it was a challenging process because it was almost 2 stories that I was trying to figure out how to tell. And trying to give meaning to something that felt absolutely meaningless. But I was editing when I got pregnant, and that's also a year and some months ago when the ethnic cleansing happened, when we were in the edit. So I was pregnant and trying to put together the story and trying to understand what it meant. And it's all been a really, there's all these analogies, right, about having a kid and making a movie. But I think it really made me feel the importance of, I think, and maybe something we all think about a lot in the types of work that we're making, is the importance of what kind of stories are your kids going to have access to? How are we documenting these things in our culture and in our history in a way that is meaningful for another generation? And that generation, I was talking to Anahit about this a little bit, but I think our ability to imagine a future really comes from the stories that we are told and the stories that we know. It helps shape how we can imagine into the future. And I think all of us are people who are trying to leave stories for our next generation that enable them to live in a better world, to imagine more freedom, to be free from things like ethnic cleansing and genocide. That is, I guess that's just becoming pregnant during this process and having a kid has helped me understand a greater meaning in the work that I'm doing. I don't know if either of you relate to that.
touching on like having this like faith and this belief and you know, working through all that, what gives you sort of the strength to keep making, like, in resistance to all the struggle and the loss and experiencing all this pain? Like, where do you get your strength from to continue to create? And like, and who is it that maybe inspired, not to like, we know what inspired the film, but like, are there any people or in your life that are like inspiring you to like continue with like the benevolence and like giving, the storytelling?
I think the people that inspire me most are actually in this room. So it's like the two of you, and then my mother, who's in the audience, are the people that inspire me. And then absolutely, like it's my fellow collaborators. Like I don't think, like I was actually we were just sitting having some food together, and I mean, like, this is so cheesy, but when I'm with other Armenian and Swana people, creatives particularly, I have this feeling that I'm like, this is actually a magical moment. There's a portal that opens when we share space and when we create together also. Like, it is actually magic. And that's what keeps me going for sure. And then also, you know, it's not like the accolades. Like I couldn't, part of my language, I couldn't give a shit like what awards I get. For me, it's more important, like the little Instagram DMs of people being like, I read your book and it made me cry. It's like, or people who are like, if there were more films like this in my life, I would live longer. My quality of life would be better. Like those messages that I actually get every day is what keeps me going. And what I wanted to say, particularly, I think the thing that connects all of our work is that we are actually going against the grain. We're telling counter narratives, right? I mean, I was saying this earlier, but like all of our projects in some way, and we can go into this, are trying to tell a different story, right? So for example, for my film, for SYMPTOM, it was really important for me to tell a story that wasn't just like, oh, these like sad queer Armenians who need to get out of a homophobic country, right? Like us in the diaspora, we have this perception of like, everyone wants to leave Armenia. It's like, that's actually just objectively not true. People love their country, people love their land, they don't want to leave. And that's why it was really important for me to tell their story, you know, collaboratively and telling it true to how they experienced it, right? That was extremely important for me because it's like, no, they don't want to leave. They love Armenia. They love Yerevan. You know, it's like where they create, etc. And it's, which makes like, obviously what makes it even more difficult to watch films like Emily's, I realized at the end where you're like, yeah, like we lost that land. We lost that. That is a homeland that that's like, so for me, what makes our work really important and to tell these other narratives. With Anahit's work, it's like especially, I think, profound because we have, I don't know if other cultures relate to this, but Armenians I think have this like self-perception that we're like these tragic, sad people, which is obviously true. Look at my eyes, but like also we are so joyful as well, you know, like we party hard. And like that's what Anahit's project is all about, is being like remembering that we are also so capable of joy. Like I am a luminous being. I am capable of joy. That is something that all Armenians, I think, or Swana people should be like telling ourselves, you know? And with Emily's film, I know that you set out to make this film of joy, right? Like these women who were what were their dreams? I remember, we've been friends for long enough to remember what the film started out as, and I remember how much you struggled with, you're like, now the war happened, like, I don't want to make a war film, you know? And I think you held that, struck that balance really beautifully, I just want to say.
Yeah, I really relate to everything you're saying. I think with this film in particular, that was such a struggle. Like, I guess we also like make films inside of like an industry and within these expectations, and I think there's all these expectations around what a film about war should look like. And for me, it was really important that like the first 40 minutes of this film are just a portrait of a beautiful life for 4 women, and really let you feel that. That felt really, really important. Yeah, and that's also why I was so drawn to Anahit's work. I think this idea of, when Artsakh was taken, when Artsakh disappeared, I try not to make it passive voice. When we lost Artsakh, I realized that everything that I had filmed there belonged to like a finite archive. Like it's a place that I don't have access to anymore. And all of a sudden there was all this responsibility around what that means. If you are the person if you are the archivist, if you are the documentor, what is your role and what is your responsibility? And I think that's why Anahit's project immediately clicked in my brain as this thing of, well, we can choose to document joy. We can choose to have complex characters. We can choose to remember also the things that were good about a place, not only the fact that it ended in tragedy. And I think that's important. And to ask you a question, since we've talked so much, what inspired your work? Like, what inspired you to create the Armenian Joy archive?
So Armenian Joy was born from the collective Armenian Creatives, where we're a group of artists where every year we make books together. So the editors will come up with a concept and email the group for our annual publication. And so this was for the second edition of our collective book, where the theme was collaboration. And we were prompted to think of an idea to collaborate with another person in the collective. And I was just, overwhelmed with the amount of talent that we have. And I couldn't pick just one person. And I really wanted to find a way to collaborate with every single person in the group. And I meditated on an idea for a really long time where I didn't even make it to the deadline of that publication. Like the idea was just kind of like a seed at the time. So there's only like a one-pager in that edition of the book where I just talk about this sort of like bigger dream of finding a way to unite everyone together in this, and like what is the thread that connects us all, that like a piece of media that we all have, whether you're an artist or not, or a creative or not. And I think it's these family photographs that that is the most accurate history of our people, are these sort of like private Kodak moments, because it's all film photography, that really captured like the true essence of who we are. And so, that's how the idea was born. And then like a year later, I started the website. And then just this year, I started the Instagram. And this way it just kind of opened up to be able to receive submissions from other people outside of the collective. So now we have 72 contributors, and next month we're starting an interview series, because at first, again, I'm just doing this all by myself on top of parenting and everything. So I didn't have the bandwidth to really get into the stories of the photographs, but we're starting an interview series where we're going to start like really getting into the stories and the histories of every single person that has contributed, and telling their family stories, like who were the heroes in their life that were sort of like the beacons of light, of joy, that were like the first to get up and start dancing at the wedding, and that like kept the whole family together, like always reminded you to speak Armenian, and then together, thanks to you guys for initiating, we're going to do a residency next spring where we're going to start adding a film component and archiving family videos that Kamee has documented through her family recordings, that we're going to edit down to add a film component to the project. And I guess now we can open up the panel to any questions from the audience, if anybody want to ask. Yes?
I actually have two questions. What I realize you're not Armenians, but I wonder if you could say something about the LGBT situation in Armenia, especially with what's going on next door in Georgia. And the other question is, we rarely hear about Armenian films. So where are your films going to be shown or have been shown? And could you say anything about the Armenian film, the situation for filmmakers in Armenia?
So We are all Armenian. I don't know if I misheard part
Oh,
of
I
that.
thought maybe you were, American, aren't you?
Oh yeah, I mean we're
sorry.
diaspora. Yeah, I mean
right,
we're all
that's
kind of.
what I meant, sorry.
I grew up in Yerevan.
Yeah.
And
Anahit grew up
Yeah.
in Yerevan. Yeah. But in terms of the experience of like queer folks in Armenia, I mean, I feel like the film speaks to it quite accurately, in that it's tenuous, but also. So I don't live in Armenia, so I don't really, I don't personally, this is why like I let the characters speak for themselves, because they are queer folks living in Armenia. But what I will say is that I think sometimes certain social issues get bumped down when things like war are happening. That's what I'm gonna leave it at that. You know, it's definitely, it's not like easy to be queer in Armenia, but I think, again, you know, when you're dealing with like war and genocide, some things get bumped down the scale. So like that film, the footage crosses like 7 years. So a lot has happened: revolution, government changes, war, COVID, you know, like a lot has happened during that time, and I tried my best to allude to the historical and geopolitical context, but so much has changed. It's quite complex, so I'll just leave it at that. And about the Armenian film, Emily will say more.
Yeah, I would say that in Armenia right now, there's like an amazing film community. There's an amazing group of folks who are making movies, both nonfiction and fiction. As far as like distribution of those films, I would say most folks in Armenia are doing like co-productions in Europe and have more distribution in Europe of those films. I can't think of like a Armenian film that has been like bigger in the US, but it's also just generally a really hard time for independent film. I mean, for all film, especially independent film. And so there's lots of movies right now that are struggling to find a way out into the public sphere, like an easy way for people to see them. So I think that is kind of no different for the filmmakers in Armenia. They're really looking for audiences. I think, of course, there is often kind of, you know, like the stories that get told and get more widely told, it's not always determined by us, right? And so I think stories from places that people don't know about also in a hard time can have a harder time finding a place. But that's why we're so grateful to orgs like the Arab Film and Media Institute, who are really highlighting stories that might not always make it into the mainstream, but are really important for us to be able to have access to. More questions? Can we start in the back and work forward?
It sounds like we're kind of referring to the land itself as an archive, and kind of different definitions of what we think of as being like colonial institutional archive. Can you speak to how you saw the land and the people as archives?
So the question was, it sounds like the land itself, you're referring to the land itself as an archive and the loss of an archive. Yeah, that's a really beautiful observation. I do think that I've been thinking a lot about the term like geographies of loss, like geographies of displacement, and how closely these lands are tied to memory and culture. And losing them, in a sense, I guess it's like a loss of a future archive, right? Like it's the loss of a future that could have been documented in a place. And I think in the face of that, my impulse is to like, create as much as I can of an archive of documentation of what was. And maybe that's kind of a universal archive. Like when we see loss happen in front of us, we want to hold on really tight to what we do have left. Yeah, that's what comes to mind.
I just want to jump in really quick and say, even though I know that earlier on, like 7 minutes ago, I said that we lost Artsakh, when I hear other people say it, I always want to correct them, because like, the land remembers, you know, and like I know that I feel like I'm gonna kick myself later. It's obviously it is a loss to not have Indigenous Armenians on that land, yes, and also like it's still there. Artsakh doesn't not exist anymore. The land is still there, and I do truly believe land as archive. I think it remembers, and the people also you mentioned as like archive, they also remember, and it's up to us to keep that alive and not to just treat it as like something that exists in the past. It exists in us, right? I've been displaced from Western Armenia for 4 generations, but it still lives in me. I am a living archive of that land, and it's still there. Even if I don't live on it, it still exists. Artsakh still exists as long as we say that it does, and we continue to live and thrive and survive.
I'm going to call on Tara because she sponsored this event.
To know that you're there to tell your story and not just take and shed light.
Oh, me? No, I just talked. Go.
You just had that heavy sigh. Yeah, I think, for me, it's like part of the ethics of nonfiction filmmaking are the ethics are relational. It's about relationships. And these are people who allowed a lot of intimacy and access into their lives. And it felt like I wanted to honor that and like also make it visible. I think obviously the idea that there's some objective observer, fly on the wall, just, creating this material out of nowhere is not the case. And my positionality as an Armenian woman in relation to them, I think, in ways that in the ways that we are similar and the ways that we are not similar was really important in that filmmaking process. And I guess like the center part of the film where they're kind of transported into the field and you actually hear my voice talking to them, that felt important to me to show before the war started, because I wanted to be clear with an audience that this isn't just something for you to watch. This isn't like a sensational storyline. It was hard, and it affected all of us. And I would have never chosen to make a film about it. If I could have gone back and changed it, I would. And so that sense of regret and nostalgia kind of permeated the filmmaking process, and I wanted that to be clear.
I think so. We are out of time, so I just wanted to mention really quickly that Anahit's archive, like the physical archive, is the photo album is downstairs at the table for everyone to look through, and I think and there was more questions, so we're going to be down there. I'm selling my children's book down there too, and Anahit's selling some really great t-shirts and zines, so please come down and yay! Somebody bought one already. We'll be down there and happy to chat more, but I think we have to wrap up here. Thank you so much, everybody.